My special guest today is musician, singer, entertainer, as well as a CrossFit coach and co-owner of the Tribe Gym here in San Antonio. My pleasure to welcome to the show, Mr. Ed Conway. Good afternoon, sir.
Hey, Joe. Appreciate you having me on, man.
Hey,
Thanks.
thanks for coming on. I appreciate your time. Ed, you're originally from Freeport in Illinois. Am I right in saying that's a couple of hours outside Chicago?
Yeah, man. If you draw a straight line, just due west and end up on the other side of the state, you'll run into a whole bunch of cows and a couple of houses, and that's where I was from.
Also, it was a small town, yeah?
Yeah, man. My house backed up to a cow pasture, and oh, man, I regularly had to wash my dog after rolling around in what we called cow pies, which you can imagine what those are.
Right, okay. Do you know what? I went to Chicago 2 years ago, and I'd never been before. And it was only for 2 nights, but I had a great time. The people were so
Chicago's a great city, yeah.
friendly, and I didn't realize it was open as late as New York. It was open like 4 in the morning.
You can get into some trouble. No.
Thankfully, I didn't. But yeah, I met a few Chicago people. I was downtown there in Rush Street, but I had a good time.
Oh, yeah.
I was actually in a place called Gibson Steakhouse. I was with my friend Dave, and we went into the lounge afterwards, and there was this old guy in a suit just playing piano. And I was just sitting around the piano listening to him. He knew everything. And as I'm talking to him, he says to me, "You from Liverpool?" I'm like, "How do you know I'm from Liverpool?" Very rare anybody in America gets exactly where you're from.
Yeah.
And he said, "Todd Rundgren's my friend, the guitar player." He said, "And I nearly joined Ringo Starr's all band." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "But I don't sing." Ringo wanted me to play keyboards. He said, "But I don't sing," but he needed vocals. So, yeah, I had a great time in Chicago.
That's awesome.
Let's talk about your music, because I know first you're a musician. When I met you, a musician first. What age did you
Yeah.
get into music?
Well, I begged my parents to get me into piano lessons when I was in first grade, and they told me, rather than investing a year's worth of income and and then me dropping out, they're like, "Well, why don't you wait till you're in second grade? If you're still interested, then we'll give you lessons." And that's kind of how I started playing piano from second grade. Took private lessons all the way through eighth grade, and I had a teacher who was older than dirt, and just I didn't really resonate with him anymore. And in eighth grade, you think you're invisible and the coolest thing since sliced bread. So I told my parents, I'm like, well, I'll keep up playing on my own, and that's what I did. I mean, I learned from that point. I really learned how to play from ear and listen to a song and identify whatever the pattern was, and then listen to the chord voicings on whatever the instrument was, whether it was a guitar or a piano, and be able to then translate it to the piano. So that's kind of like early years of how I first got started. And then
So you started
yeah,
playing
I
from 8 years
really
old. So you're
yeah,
around 8 years old. You
yeah.
started piano. Yeah, that's young.
Yeah, I mean, my family, I grew up around, my dad's side of the family is all very musical, all great singers and great instrumentalists. And so I grew up with that as a really young influence, as part of, the youngest I can remember from my memory. All the holidays were spent singing and playing music. So that's always been a part of my life. And I've always been surrounded by that. So I think it just kind of came naturally to me that was just something that I wanted to pursue, and
Yeah.
it wasn't like a lot of where I hear a lot of peer stories of their parents forcing them to take piano lessons or whatever instrument it was, and them 10 years later them resenting their parents for it.
Yeah.
I was very much the opposite story.
Do you remember your first live performance?
I do, in my piano teacher's house,
Okay.
and I played Führer Elise by Beethoven, and it was a nerve-wracking, but it was a great experience. It was this small little house, and she had like probably 20 students, and so you can imagine 20 students plus 20 students' parents, so there's like 40 adults, and I mean everybody was just sweating, and you could smell like the adult BO like after a while, because it was just such a small cramped space, and that was my first recital experience.
Who were your musical influences?
Oh man, early on, so my mom had a great record collection. She kept from like the 60s and 70s. So I mean, I like Iron Maiden and Iron Butterfly, um, Eric Clapton, or at that time Derek and the Dominoes.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of like classic rock stuff. Um, Jackson Brown was one that I kind of picked up early on just because of the piano. I resonated with that, and there wasn't a lot of classic rock that was piano driven. So I liked a lot of Jackson Brown stuff early on, and then obviously found the Beatles and the kind of like the mainstream 70s, 60s, 70s, and then eventually 80s. You know, Obviously mainstream stars. And then I kind of my influence shifted when I started to learn guitar, and then okay, let's listen. I listened to a lot of James Taylor at that time. Of like how does he voice and play at the same time, and then and sing at the same time while he's doing these really intricate voicings on the guitar.
Yeah.
Um, so stuff like that, and then like I said, some Clapton stuff, some easier Clapton stuff, because at the time I was just kind of self teaching myself the guitar.
Yeah, because your main instrument.
Then,
Sorry, your main instrument is the piano, but you started your first paid gigs on acoustic guitar, right?
yeah, that's right.
Tell us about your early gigs.
First big gig was Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and yeah, that was just all. Man, I think I knew a total of like 20 songs, and I spread those 20 songs as long as I could play each one of those songs to fill. I think like I had like a 2 hour set, and I mean, it was brutal in hindsight. Like I can't believe they actually paid me for that gig, but uh, but that was my first taste of a live performance in Milwaukee, and yeah, I definitely. I mean, asking about influences, like it shifted as I kind of went through the years. So it started off piano driven, and learned a lot of instrumental stuff. I hate to like some people are like, you listen to Yanni? I'm like, yeah, I listen to Yanni, but it really did like help me dial in how to learn how to play by ear on the piano, and then it shifted to guitar, and then later on it shifted to vocals, and I really um, was like, man, how does Steve Perry sing like that? And how did these 80s metal bands how can they sing how can they sing for 2 hours and still have a voice? And so I really got intrigued with vocal technique, and kind of dove into that for a good solid like 10 years, and studied the technique of speech level singing with Seth Riggs, who's out of California at that time, and worked with a lot of famous vocalists, Stevie Wonder and Madonna. He's just his style of singing, and just a lot of cool vocal artists that I was like, I want to be able to do that. I just have no idea how. So kind of full circle of just kind of where my influences were, and
Yeah.
and then after that Milwaukee gig, ended up moving to Chicago, and a couple of acoustic gigs before a friend of mine he walked me into this piano bar called HOWL at the Moon, and it was a dueling piano setting where you got a couple guys up there with two pianos facing each other and taking requests all night. And he, gave one of the piano players a couple of bucks, and they called me up on stage, and I sang like the only two cover songs that I knew at the time on the piano. It was like it was a Dave Matthews song, and then Piano Man by Billy Joel, and I could tell like I played Piano Man, and they all looked at me like, why are you burning this one like most famous song that we get a lot of money for, and you're playing it for free? So that was my introduction to dueling pianos, and that scene. And a couple months later, got offered a job there, and been with them for a while.
Were you 18 years total?
Yeah.
Right, with Howl the
Yep.
Moon. But you started out in Chicago. Your first Howl the Moon was Chicago, yeah?
Yeah, and then from there, Seattle, and then I only stayed in Seattle for about a year and a half, and then they relocated me down here to San Antonio. I've been here for about 15 years, so
Yeah.
this has been home for a while, up until recently when COVID hit, and my career with them kind of came to an end, and started to realize that I could do some other stuff on my own, and I've been enjoying that.
Well, the first 6 months when I met you at the Howl, you one of the piano players, but you became entertainment director. for the company.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
And you were that for a while. Yeah, for a long
That
time.
was yeah, that was that was both a good experience and something that in hindsight I probably wouldn't accept that job again. I mean, uh,
It's responsibility, isn't it?
yeah, well, it's responsibility, and when you're in charge of, 5 to 6 other entertainers, musicians aren't really known for being punctual or responsible or sober. So
Well, it is.
it was
It's a lot of responsibility being in charge of Michael Clavijo, isn't it?
yeah, that's right.
Our old friend.
Or the likes of, I mean,
Yeah.
it was a full time, I don't want to call it a babysitting job because it certainly wasn't, but I mean,
Mm.
it felt like it at some times, it's just like, you
Well,
know,
I did a similar job on the cruise ships, but it was only on water. I was entertainment director. They call it cruise director. I did that for 2 years before finishing on the ships, and there's a lot of, you've got to put up with a lot. But I also had
yeah,
the people upstairs to put up with, like staff captains, hotel managers, the
yeah,
president of the
yeah.
cruise line. And I remember thinking, I was happy just singing in the shows and then going to the bar afterwards. Now I've got all this on my head. So I feel you
Well,
there. I know what you
that's
mean.
kind of what, because Howard the Moon is the same way. Howard the Moon is a corporate, company, and so, you know,
Mm.
after a while, it was just like, man, I remember when I just used to have a lot of fun just coming in and turning on my microphone and, playing 3 hours in a night and
Yeah.
collecting some cash and going home. And now I got to answer to corporate people and I have to have conference calls, at 2 o'clock in the middle of the day. And,
Yeah.
I have to have manager meetings. And it's just like, I feel like less of a musician and more of like an accountant.
But now you work near me on the San Antonio Riverwalk. You're at Mad Dog's British pub. I'm at Waxy O'Connor's Irish pub. But we're both in a great spot. It's great to be back on the Riverwalk again, especially after the pandemic and the lockdown.
Yeah, that's
You
for
know,
sure. Um, yeah, it was kind of just one of those serendipity things where it was just like, I was kind of reaching the end of my rope in terms of, what they wanted to hear at Howl at the Moon and
Mm.
the staff at the time. I mean, now they're mostly early to mid 20-year-olds, and I just turned 40, so it's like I'm having less and less in common with the people that I work with, along with a style of music that is not typically or inherently fun to play, you
Mm.
know. Um, so it just happened, COVID was what the answer was of like, all right, well, when is the time to leave Howl at the Moon? And yeah, Mad Dogs, they opened up like 8 months before Howl at the Moon reopened up, and they offered us a job right when they opened, and
Mm.
jumped on that. And yeah, it's been getting back to the roots of like being able to play music that you like to play and entertaining people. Having the people that are in the club, be entertained because you can play their request or because you can, make their request personal to them. And
Mm.
and that art was a little bit lost towards the end of my employment at Howl at the Moon. So
But back in the early days, I've been to Howl many times, and the amount of songs you guys have to learn was like, wow. I mean, it was like made to order, like human
yeah,
jukeboxes. But as I say, you're at Mad Dogs now, and it's you, Adrian Lopez, Katie Klassen. Does Matt
yep.
still play drums with you too?
No, not. I think he might have
Just,
played when one of us was out
oh,
one
you
night,
just used to
but
fill in, yeah.
I think that was just kind of a one-off deal.
Mm.
But yeah, a bunch of ex Howl at the Moon players, just kind of doing the show that we know works, and like I
Yeah,
said, getting back to the concept of playing the requests that the people want to hear has been refreshing for us for sure.
yeah. But you also still do a lot of private shows as well.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, the wedding business is picking back up. The convention business is picking back up. So getting some private gigs, probably consistently 1 to 3 a month, all around Texas, Austin, Houston, and San Antonio are the primary locations for gigs that I pick up. And a couple of cities in between here and Austin. But yeah, I mean the industry as a whole, it seems to be back, and it seems to be um, to the point where like musicians can live off of being a musician again. You know what I mean? Like there's no longer a need to be a mailman during the day and then wait for gigs to come your way.
yeah. As I said, we're in a good spot, both of us on the Riverwalk. I pinch myself sometimes thinking, how did we get through the pandemic? You know, we were doing our live streams and stuff, but I can't believe how
Yeah,
long it was because,
you killed it during the live stream
it was
stuff.
like,
You were tearing it up with that.
who would have thought it would have been that long?
I
You know,
know.
when this happened,
I
we
know.
thought, oh, I did 29 weeks. I counted 29 weeks from
That's
home.
crazy.
I know. It is really, yeah, yeah.
That
Okay,
is crazy. Yeah.
I know.
You did, I mean, you did so well. I had to stop asking you how much money you made. I was sick of hearing about it.
Just blessed to have people tuning in. You know, all them people I met at Waxy's through the years. A lot of people from Austin, Dallas, Houston, New York. Even had a couple from Jamaica. Been down there. Used to tune in from Jamaica every Friday night.
That's
So that was
awesome.
cool, you know. Let's move on to health and fitness. You're the co-owner and head coach at the Tribe Gym here in San Antonio. When did you decide you wanted to go into CrossFit? Because I remember working out with you when we used to work out downtown back in the day.
Yeah. Fitness has always been part of athletics has always been a part of my life, and I think for a long time I struggled to find some self identity, like there was my football buddies and then there was my musician buddies, and those groups never really intermingled growing up. And so I had felt like I had to hide the musician side of it. It was cool to be a football player, not so cool to be a piano player until you get like past high school and then you realize that all the girls like piano players. So like, oh, okay, now I guess I can tell everybody that I play piano. But yeah, so athletics has always been a part of my life, and working out for the most part has been a part of my life since middle school.
Mm.
Um, After you talked about you and I, we worked out, and I was kind of trying different things at the time to like, all right, I know this is good for me. I know I need to do this. I know I enjoy doing this. I just don't know kind of what path to go down. And um, always having always been in a competitive sport, I liked the idea of competition. And so, back in 2010, my wife's aunt actually she qualified for the CrossFit Games, and which is a big deal. I mean, that's like the culmination of all the top athletes from around the world,
Yeah.
and they get together and they, you know, duke it out for 2 days or 3 days, whatever it is, and in a variety of different workouts, and crown the fittest man and woman. And I went out there, saw that, and was like, man, this is awesome. And kind of with a realistic tone in the back of my head saying you'll probably never get this good, but like this is something where I could do on a local level and compete at different local events. And so that's what I did. I mean, I came back and I joined a local gym, a local CrossFit gym, and started getting familiar with the movements and um, familiar with just the sport of that, because that's really what drew me in. And along the way realized that wow, it's it could be more than a sport. It could be a lifestyle, and this could be something that I might want to choose to share with other people. And so I dove into the education side of it and started getting certified in not only CrossFit but USAW, the weightlifting, USA weightlifting, and really started to kind of hone in on what was driving me, what I was passionate about, and then from there it became really easy for me to share that with other people. And so got certified, started coaching at a local gym, met a guy, his name is Nick Vera, and he and I became very good friends, and eventually decided that we were working at the same gym, and we decided we had a different vision for a gym. We wanted it to be more of a community outreach and ministry into the local community, but through an avenue of fitness. And so, we got an investor that was all about it. And yeah, it was 6 years ago, almost to today. It was June 6th, I think, is our first day that we opened up. And
Wow, it's
yeah,
been
we've been
6 years already. I remember you opening the gym.
yeah, 6 years. I know.
Wow.
So we've been rocking and rolling, and it's been true to what our original vision was. I mean, we've been able to do some community outreach events and hold private studies at night, men's group studies, we have women's group studies. It's so much more than just coming in and lifting, doing a couple of arm curls and
Yeah.
shins and calling it a day. I mean, it truly is. Everybody that walks in that gym knows everybody else, and it
Mm.
truly is a community of people that have bought into our vision.
When was CrossFit founded, and who founded CrossFit?
Man, I get asked that a lot. I think the first CrossFit gym might have been 2000 and I want to say 4 or 5. And it started off as just some guy's garage. Greg Glassman was the original owner of CrossFit and kind of came up with that idea and branded it and all that on the branding side of it. He came up with all that, and then it grew out of that. And so early days, I mean, it was like people's garages are a warehouse, and I mean, there's dirt on the floor and blood on the barbells, and I mean, it quickly became like this, almost like a grungy form of workout. That people were almost like they gave themselves a gold star if they came home with like torn hands or a bloody knee or something like that. It was very very gritty. Um, but as it got bigger and as it got more popular and it became more mainstream, it appealed to a different spectrum of people. Like it wasn't just for your people that were like ex-athletes or people that wanted to compete all the time. It became like, all right, now I'm seeing a 70-year-old grandma or a soccer mom in the gym, and they don't necessarily care about, I mean, they want to, soccer mom wants to keep all of her nails intact, like, so they don't want that type of like in your face,
Yeah,
gritty,
yeah.
hardcore atmosphere. And so gyms had to kind of grow with that. And so from there, then you started to see like standalone brick and mortar buildings, rather than having it be out of a garage, and all of a sudden buildings had air conditioning in it, which was like a novelty, like CrossFit gyms didn't have air conditioning,
I've watched some of the routines, talking about the Backstreet Gym, and I've watched some of the
Yeah.
routines and noticed there's a lot of jumps, holding weights. I used to do similar workouts at the Return Gym in Liverpool over 30 years ago. We had a coach called Jimmy Albertina. We used to do stance jumps. So
Yep.
you'd jump holding the dumbbells. We do stance punch, which you jump as high as you could, and you have to throw 4 punches before you land. We do stance drive, which is in a boxing stance to the front of the mat, to the back of the mat. These were our circuits after the pads and after, tons of bag work. And they were 30-second circuits. So you get about 6 exercises, 30 seconds on each, flat out.
Yeah.
And I was interesting to see the CrossFit guys doing a lot of that stuff. I'm like, wow, that takes me back. I remember doing that back home,
Yeah, I don't think CrossFit, to my knowledge, there might be one or two movements that are very particular to CrossFit or that you mainly only see in CrossFit gyms. But for the most part, they never really invented anything. They just took a whole bunch of exercises that were already around and said, okay, we're going to do a run, we're going to do a barbell lift, and we're going to do a gymnastics piece, and we're going to do that for 3 rounds. And they just kind of packaged it and they marketed it so well that all of a sudden people that had never heard of like a clean and jerk or a snatch, now all of a sudden like that's like mainstream lifts now because CrossFit came along and put them into those workouts. Those lifts, the Olympic lifts have been around for years, since the 1920s. Really is where it became mainstream in the Olympics. And so we've been taking those two lifts and really the popularity once CrossFit hit the scene of of Olympic weightlifting exponentially shot through the roof over the years because now everybody was exposed to those lifts in CrossFit style workouts. And so I think that's what CrossFit really did, in terms of the benefit to the overall world of fitness is it reintroduced some movements that people weren't doing for a long time and made them mainstream. And so, now everybody knows, now everybody's doing burpees and thrusters and, all the
Yeah.
stuff that you were probably doing back in your boxing gym,
Yeah.
you didn't even think twice about. But
So it's a combination of everything, really.
conditioning, gymnastics, barbell lifts,
Mm.
body weight stuff. It really does just take most facets of fitness and encompass them in a workout program.
So as well
So
as doing your heavy lifts, because I've seen you doing the real heavy lifts, you do like one rep of
yeah,
whatever you clean and jerk now, whatever. But it's do you have different workouts for yourself? Do you do like light workouts as well, like a lot of
yeah,
repetitions and low weight as well? So you mix it up a bit.
yeah, for sure. I mean, again, I just recently turned 40, and I think about 10 years ago I could probably handle a little bit more volume, but now I got to be realistic, and my body is not as, it doesn't recover as fast as it once did.
Yeah.
So if I go in and I lift really heavy one day, that next day is probably going to be a light cardio day, or maybe just a body weight day. Maybe it's just push-ups and air squats and sit-ups, something that is going to keep my heart rate higher but not put extra wear and tear on my joints. I do really like lifting heavy, but in order for me to be able to do that consistently, I have to constantly balance, going on a heavy day and then staying really light or low impact on the off days. But yeah, man, it's been cool, and I really, like I said earlier, I struggled a long time, with where was my identity, and was it a musician, was it an athlete, was it both? How could it be both? And this opportunity to own a gym is kind of let me realize how it can be both, and how one ties to the other. Like, if I don't work out and if I don't consistently stay fit, then I'm tired at the end of a gig at the end of the night, and I wake up the next morning from a gig and I'm groggy and I got, circles under my eyes.
Mm.
And then conversely, if I work out consistently and I stay diligent through that, I feel 10 times better the next day after I play a gig at night.
Well, a lot of people don't
Um,
realize that what we do as musicians. A lot of people don't realize, oh, he's just up there singing. It's very physical, especially you're doing 3 hours, 4 hours a night, a
yeah,
few nights a week.
mentally too. I mean, I just
Yeah.
dealing with the people, you know what I mean? Like that takes it out of you sometimes. I'm at, you know, it's fine at 8 o'clock at night, but when you're trying to understand what somebody's saying to you at 1:30 in the morning
Yeah.
after, 15 Jaeger bombs, it's like, that's mentally draining. To, and so like mentally it helps just to kind of get to the gym and just clear out that, that mental frustration almost.
Then you're ready for the next night.
That's
Yeah,
right.
round two.
That's right.
What programs then do you offer at the gym?
Typically, most of what we do is in a class format. So you'll have 1 to 2 classes, or 1 to 2 coaches per class, running the class. And so you come in and they'll go through a warm up together. They'll go through kind of a first part one piece, whether that's a strength piece or a conditioning piece that usually lasts, 12-ish minutes. And then you go through part two, which is the workout of the day. And so the coaches are there to make sure that everybody's doing the right technique and giving people modifications if they need it. If they're dealing with like an injury or mobility issues, they'll say, all right, instead of back squats with the barbell, you're just going to do regular body weight squats. You're not going to use any weight, or modifying a movement just to keep them safe, but keep the intensity the same.
I was just going to say, so somebody joins you, you actually monitor them first. You don't just throw them
For
in.
sure.
You just don't throw
Oh
them
yeah.
in the lion's den.
Yeah, for sure, man. Especially because of the volume and the intensity. Some people aren't used to it, and you see the biggest culprit is like ex-athletes that have been really good at something in the past,
Yeah.
and taken some time off, and then they come back to the gym and they want to hit it really hard. And those are the ones that we usually see losing their breakfast outside the parking lot after the workout.
Yeah.
So we try not to have that be the norm. We try to ease people into it. But we also offer, one-on-one personal training, and there's some smaller group stuff that we do. I personally teach our weightlifting course that we have that runs in 6-week cycles, and that's more of just a strength program revolving around the snatch and the clean and jerk. So yeah, there's some one-off stuff that we do, but typically I'd say 95% of everything that we do is done in that class format.
It's always a class in there. You don't get people just coming in and working out on their own. So it's a big
Typically
part of
not.
it.
No, I mean, there's a block of day from 9:30 to noon where people can do that. People can come in, and we call it open gym. They can do whatever they want. 95% of what we do is all class format and run by a coach.
What's the best platform to find out more about the tribe?
Easiest way to do it, just go online. It's just the Tribe SC, as in strength and conditioning. So thetribesc.com. Everything's on the website. Our schedule's there. Our contact information's there. You got an availability to just print out or purchase a free week membership. They can come in and try us out for free for a week. The website is definitely the easiest way to go about doing that.
Ed, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Joe, I appreciate you having me on, man.
Thank you
Thanks.
for your time. Thanks, buddy.